Part 51. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 503. It was the token of the Xixia army. Fei found it in the hands of a villager when he was leading someone to move the corpse. Gave it to Chi-Heiran. Fei didn't understand why he told everyone that it was done by Xixia soldiers, but didn't show it, but let everyone spend time looking for the traces and evidence left by the murderer. Chi-Heiran lowered his eyes and said, "They need time, and I need time too." Chi-Heiran didn't explain too much, just turned around and went back to the room, wrote a secret letter to Fei, and said, "You and the scouts go to the nearest county town to inquire about news, and take this opportunity to pass this letter on." Fei didn't ask any further questions, put the secret letter away, turned around and withdrew. The imperial court has now fought against the rebels, and there are winners and losers. Generally speaking, the imperial court has taken back more cities than lost, so it can barely be regarded as a victory. Hearing the news brought back by the scouts, all the soldiers were shocked and looked at Chi-Heiran. Chi-Heiran lowered his eyes and said, "When the other two teams come back, we will continue to look for the Imperial Army." Vice General Zhone was stunned. "Aren't we going to find the murderer?" "I'm looking for it, but I want to be more sure," Chi-Heiran said. "If we can meet the Imperial Army, then we will have no worries. This is the critical time to suppress the bandits. Will the marshal who leads the army listen to our side? So we have to collect evidence and report it to the Imperial Court. We are not competing with them for military merit. In the face of a big enemy, everyone should unite and inquire about the nearest Imperial Army camp," Chi-Heiran instructed Deputy General Zhone. Vice General Zhone shrugged and ordered to go on. They planned to go to Tongran to rest there and listen to the Imperial Court's orders, but now they urgently need to join the army, so naturally they can't go to Tongran anymore, and the nearest army station is in Ye County. Marching quickly it will take 2.5 days. Vice General Zhone was about to order people to prepare dry food for the road, when the two scouting teams sent out came back, and the first team looked okay, and replied, "General, everything is normal on our road except for the bandit harassment." The local people can also testify that they are all locals. The other team's face was a little pale. "General, we searched carefully along the way and found that many mountain passes were trampled on a large scale. We asked the nearby villagers and townspeople, and found that some villagers and townspeople disappeared for no reason during this period. So far no person or body has been found, but because bandits are raging now, the Yamen doesn't pay much attention to this matter. But we checked privately. Those people appeared in similar places at about the same time. We searched along those places and found that there were hidden tracks. We roughly estimated that there were about 2,000 people in the other party. Where they left, we found several buried corpses. Strangely, the wounds on the corpses and the fatal wounds of the villagers seemed to be caused by the same weapon, but the knife technique was completely different. The other party seemed to be covering up something. Does this need to be said? Of course it is to cover up your identity. General, those who are alone are more than enough to kill, so there is still time to change the sword technique, but when we arrived at the village, it was obvious that the incident happened suddenly. The other party decided to massacre the village, so it was too late to cover up, but out of instinct, he used his best knife technique to kill people. General, give an order. These Xixia people broke into our great Zhou. I don't know how many tragedies will happen. They are even more beasts than bandits." Chi-Heiran frowned and asked, "You said you estimated there were about 2,000 people? But we only found about 500 people around the village, so where did the other 1,500 people go?" As soon as the words came out, everyone was silent. Chi-Heiran turned around a few times, and said, "We can't let things go. After 2.5 days we will lose a lot of traces if we find the big troops and send people out to investigate. Finding 2,000 people in Zhou is as difficult as climbing the sky. What does the general mean?" Divided into 4 teams, One team will continue to go back to find the Imperial army, and the other 3 teams will try to find Zixia soldiers and leave traces along the way, Chi Heiran said. Try not to conflict with them, and don't be discovered by them. Our main task is to find and monitor them. Then who will lead the team back to find the Imperial army? Vice General Zhone was most concerned about this. Chi Heiran grinned, and said, let the 1st Battalion Commander Jian lead the troops back. You take a team to investigate the 1st team, I will take the 1st team, and the 3rd Battalion and 5th Battalion Commander Jian will lead a team. Deputy General Zhone opened his mouth, wanting to say that he would lead the team back, but meeting Chi Heiran's eyes, he didn't say that. He didn't believe Chi Heiran, and Chi Heiran didn't believe him either. The best way is to let others went back. In the evening, Chi Heiran gathered Vice General Zhong and the 5 battalion chiefs together, and said, now we each have something to do with each other, so if we lose everything, you should think more about it when you do things, so as not to make compromises for the things I regret. I, Chi, will put the words here first. Everyone can fight in any way, but at this time the national crisis and the family are in trouble. If you let me know who framed my colleagues at this time, and became the helper of the barbarians and Tartars, someone from Chi will fulfill him and let him be a hero for Zixia or Jin. Chi Heiran looked at them sharply, and everyone lowered their head slightly. This threat was too serious, and no one dared to ignore it, because Chi Heiran was their superior, and he had their backs. At that time, not only they, but even their family members will have to die. At this time, not only the general manager of the battalion who took the mission back, but also Deputy General Zhong did not dare to think about this matter. After several months of getting along with them, it can also be seen that Chi Heiran's temper is a little stubborn, and if he is sure about it, even the Heavenly King and Lao Tzu will stop him. They didn't have the guts to gamble with the lives of the whole family. Chi Heiran took out all the food in this village and divided it into 4 parts, 3 big ones and 1 small one, and handed over the smallest part to the chief executive of the 1st Battalion, and said, you guys are going back, this is enough, the rest is leave it to the other brothers. It's all up to the general. The chief executive of Yiying Jian has no opinion at all. After all, his task is the simplest and safest. Satisfied, Chi Heiran divided the 3 rations and drew out the scope of everyone's investigation. No matter what method you use to find Zixia soldiers, you only need to remember 3 points. First, do not endanger the people, and second, you are not allowed to betray the country, and third, you are not allowed to disregard the lives of your comrades in arms. Yes, everyone stood up and listened to the order. Chi Heiran was personally responsible for massacring the Zixia soldiers in the village, while the other 2 teams returned to the place where there were traces of 2,000 people before, and searched from there. Chi Heiran waited for everyone to leave, then turned his head and said to the 2nd Battalion Chief Jian, who was following him, let everyone take off their military uniforms and change into ordinary people's clothes. Let's go to Huayuan County. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 504. Huayuan County had already been occupied by bandits on the way they came before, so they made a big circle just to avoid the bandits in Huayuan County. But why do they want to join in now? You must know that there are only 200 of them now. Although the general manager of the 2nd Battalion had doubts in his heart, he turned around and gave orders as quickly as possible. Chi Heiran nodded slightly. The reason why he chose him to follow him was because he was the most obedient but the least talkative among the 5 general managers. Know what to ask and what not to ask. In the army, the orders of the superiors only need to be carried out. Fei Bai didn't have this self-awareness. He followed Chi Heiran ghostly, and asked, Master, how do we get to Huayuan County? What if we get caught? We are just a small band of bandits, who will catch us? Chi Heiran said nonchalantly, don't worry, with my master here, I can't kill you. Fei Bai's eyes widened, and he lowered his voice and asked, Master, when did we become bandits? When changing clothes, Chi said while finding out a set of patched clothes from the cabinet in the private house, took off the clothes on his body and changed them on, then patted his stomach and said, "How is it, sir? Like a bandit who robbed a house?" Fei shook his head, "You seem to have been robbed by bandits." Chi kicked him, and said, "Go and get the pot ashes, I have to toss about. By the way, you have to change your clothes too. From now on you are no longer my servant, but Grandpa's younger brother. I will call Grandpa the head of the family in the future, you understand?" Fei turned around and brought the pot ashes, trying to persuade him, "Master, even if you want to find out where those people are, there's no need to pretend to be a bandit. If those old scholars in the court know about it, they won't be able to impeach you. Impeach them if they want to impeach. I don't care. Are you willing to pretend to be a bandit? This is a last resort. Those people have gone to such great lengths to bypass Yongyi and enter Jinghu Lake. They definitely didn't want Jinghu to come around. It's as simple as killing a village around. After Jinghu Lake is Linen." Chi stopped talking, and then said after a while, "Except for Huayuan County, other places around here are still under the control of the imperial court, because bandits are rampant. Now that patrols have been strengthened everywhere, it is very difficult for them so many strangers to pass through the area controlled by the imperial court, but it is different in other places. Although the bandits have occupied the city, few of them can fully control it. They are chaotic and have different camps. It is easy for hundreds of them to get in. But they have been walking for 2 days, and they should have passed Huayuan County at this time, so why do we go to Huayuan County to be bandits? Who said I'm going to Huayuan County to become a bandit? Huayuan is just a springboard. Apart from the Imperial Army, the most people in Jinghu are bandits. In some respects, the information sources of the bandits are faster and more comprehensive than the Imperial Army. Grandpa think, if you can have a place among the bandits, can the bandits help you find these people, or even kill them?" Fei opened his mouth wide and stammered to stop him, "Master, fourth master, isn't this chess game too big? Why don't we follow the traces obediently? At worst, the big guys won't be sleeping anymore. It's hard work. Some people can always be found out. As soon as you are an official, you bring a group of soldiers dressed as bandits into the bandits' den. If you are discovered, you haven't seen the young master yet." Chi has always been a person who is very good at listening to the opinions of his subordinates, so he thought about it carefully, and finally felt that the advantages of his idea outweighed the disadvantages, so he said firmly, "My father's decision is made. You should hurry up and change your clothes. Also, call everyone here." Chi was going to mobilize before the war. Soldiers who had changed into ordinary people's clothes stood in front of the dapping. With all kinds of messy clothes and a somewhat sluggish look, they looked like remnants and defeated generals. If it was usual, Chi would be determined when he saw this appearance he had to kick them, but Chi was very satisfied now. He felt that the soldiers didn't need to pretend. Just pulling them out like this was a situation where a bunch of small bandits were scattered by the Imperial Army. Chi shared his ideas and what everyone would like to say in the future, and said, "I know that you have been wronged in this mission. After all, it is unimaginable for a soldier to pretend to be a bandit, but compared to bandits, Zixia soldiers are undoubtedly more hateful." The soldiers in Jinghu had only heard how terrifying the Hu people were, and how detestable and hateful foreign humiliation was, but in fact they had never fought against the Hu people, or even met each other, so their aversion to them was only limited to the fact of Tuken and all kinds of hearsay. Chi told everyone based on the facts he had experienced that once the barbarians were allowed to enter the customs, the people would have no way of life, which directly raised the honor and difficulty of their mission by 3 levels. The soldiers were both excited and terrified when they heard it, and finally they had to forcefully cover their faces, and they were as depressed as before according to what Chi said, but it was very difficult to become depressed after hearing Chi words. Chi Heiran didn't expect his mobilization effect to be so good that he was self-defeating. He could only guide everyone on it with sweat profusely. Fei Bai's mouth twitched, and he said in a low voice, "Master, I think it's like this now, the more you guide the more chaotic it gets, the more people will not know what to do." Chi Heiran sighed, nodded, and waved his hand to let the strike go towards Huayuan County. 2 days later, they rushed along the main road to the gate of Huayuan County. There were some bandits standing at the gate in various poses. They were impatiently letting passers-by into the city. "Check it up and down, and put it in if there is no problem." Chi Heiran and his men stopped not far from the gate of the city. The bandits guarding the gate had spotted them a long time ago, so they sent people back to find those who could be in charge, and came up to them by themselves. Chi Heiran and his party were too eye-catching. More than 200 people gathered together, dressed in tatters, with a slightly sluggish expression. In this place where bandits are rampant, it is easy to think in a wrong way. The gatekeeper bandit, who felt that everyone was a bandit, came up to him with a decent attitude and asked, "Where are you from?" Chi Heiran looked him up and down, and continued to look up at the plaque on the gate of the city. Just as the gatekeeper frowned, Fei Bai immediately bent over with a smile and said, "Brother, please forgive me, our head is still young, so he has a bit of a temper while speaking." He took a piece of broken silver and stuffed it into the opponent's hand. The gatekeeper raised his eyebrows slightly, squeezed the broken silver in his sleeve, raised his eyelids and glanced at Chi Heiran, with a half smile and said, "The boss. It seems that they are from the same way, but I don't know where this young man is from. What is it going to do?" "Brother, forgive me." Fei Bai pulled the gatekeeper bandits aside and said in a low voice, "Our village originally had more than 2,000 people, but it was inexplicably encircled and suppressed by the imperial court some time ago, and all the people were dispersed. Only 200 of us, many of us broke out with our big master, and we suffered heavy losses, so the big master is in a bad mood. Please forgive me." "Humph, I'd like to forgive you, but the masters in the city are not as easy to talk to as I am." "I said you are too good at picking masters, right? You are only in your teens. Young people are the most impulsive people. Don't you want to be cheated to death?" Fei Bai just chuckled. The bandits at the gate didn't say much, but just waved their hands and said, "Now the dog officials of the imperial court are fighting with us, so you came at the right time. Our leaders should take you in, but you also tell your leaders to restrain your temper." "Hundreds of people, what's so arrogant? I have 50 people under my control." Yes, how can it be compared to you working for a big man? Just a small errand can beat us by several blocks." The bandits at the gate didn't understand the hidden meaning, so they nodded in satisfaction, and said kindly, "Now there are 3 masters in the city. You are lucky. It just so happens that Master Lu is on duty today, and he will probably come to see you in person in a while. Just stand on the left side of the city gate and stay there." Fei Bai also wanted to find out more information. They had clearly heard that a bandit leader surnamed Yang was in power in Huayuan County before, so why now there are 3 masters? But the gatekeeper obviously didn't want to say more, or Chi Heiran's attitude irritated him, so he waved his hand and returned to his post. Fei Bai could only return to Chi Heiran's side, and told him the news he had received in a low voice. "Master, Huayuan County seems to have changed." Chi Heiran said in a low voice, "Play by ear. If it's not right, everyone retreat into the woods." Everyone passed on the message one by one. After half a quarter of an hour, although the team was still sluggish, everyone's backs were secretly tense, and they were ready to rush out at any time. At such a tense moment, Fei Bai couldn't help but let out an "ah," surprised. His eyes widened. Lu Dehei also looked at the more than 200 people opposite in surprise, and then met Chi Heiran's quiet eyes. He raised his eyebrows, and the bandit at the gate was suspicious, and asked a little nervously, "Master Lu, do you know the opposite side, that person?" I know you even when you turn them into ashes. After Lu Dehe finished speaking, he cupped his hands at Chi Heiran and said, Young Master Chi, you're fine. I haven't seen you for a few days. I don't know how you are doing now. This obviously vengeful reply made the gatekeeper shrink his neck in regret. If he had known that he would not have entertained people so warmly before. Chi Heiran's expression was calm, and he said, I live a better life than Mr. Lu. Recently, someone from Chi has been thinking about Mr. Lu and Mr. Lin, but it's a pity that he left in a hurry and forgot the contact address. Knowing that Chi Heiran didn't renege on his debts, Lu Dehe's complexion became better, and then he was interested in looking at him. Where did Mr. Chi come from? Why does he look like he is being bullied? Tell Big Brother who did it. Yes, Big Brother will open the ladle for you. No, I like to do it myself. Master Lu really wants to help, so find someone for me. The more Chi Heiran talked, the more he felt smart, and it seemed that Lu Dehe was not so annoying when he appeared here. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 505. Lu Dehe's face was slightly embarrassing. He just said that, and he hoped that Chi Heiran would hear it like that. Who knew that this kid really had the cheek to mention it? He squinted at the other party to warn the other party not to go too far. They are still officials now. The relationship with the bandits, moreover, is now on his territory. Chi Heiran pretended that he didn't understand, stepped forward and hugged Lu Dehe's shoulders and walked into the city. The two brothers said kindly, Master Lu, you have to help me when my brother is in trouble this time. The brothers under my command recently, I was only thinking about running for my life, and I didn't even drink a sip of hot water. When Lu Dehe heard this, he became anxious. Chi Heiran was his and Lin Man's whole card, so don't end up becoming a bad card. He was eager to know Chi Heiran's current strength, and he was in no mood to test and delay any longer. With a big wave of his hand, he brought him back to his mansion. The gatekeeper bandits kept hunching their necks and watched the situation quietly, and when they saw someone leave, they hurriedly asked someone to notify Yang's family. Lu Dehe left Chi Heiran's people to be arranged by the people below, and brought Chi Heiran into his study room. When he saw Fei Bai and a battalion manager following behind him, he stopped. Chi Heiran waved his hands to let Fei Bai and President Ying Qian went down to arrange and restrain the brothers, and followed Lu Dehe into the study alone. Lu Dehe couldn't help admiring the other party's courage in his heart, and also kept his own people outside. Lu Dehe closed the door, and when he turned around, he saw Chi Heiran flipping through the books on his bookshelf in disgust. What's the use of reading these books? Chi Heiran flipped through it, and found that the book was very new, and there was no trace of flipping, so he curled his lips and said, so it's just for display. Lu Dehe's face was slightly dark, and he felt a little displeased. He looked at Chi Heiran gloomily and said nothing. He was illiterate. He is obviously so smart, but he has no chance to read. Because of this, every time someone seeks refuge, he will choose Lin Man first. Even if the other party is not as good as him in all aspects, those people will be confused by his appearance and resume. Chi Heiran didn't know the darkness in Lu Dehe's heart. At this time, he had been killed 7 or 8 times in his heart, but he threw the book on the shelf with some disgust, and said, these books are not good looking. I suggest that only those who want to read and write just read 3 character classics, the Analects of Confucius and Book of Changes. Of course, if you want to learn how to train soldiers and fight, you need to read many books. Lu Dehe suppressed the tyranny in his heart, and said casually, don't you children of aristocratic families all ask to read the 4 books and 5 classics? Why does General Qi only recommend me to read 2 books? Or in your eyes, we mud-legged, are you not worthy of reading the 4 books and 5 classics? We don't need to take the imperial examination. Since we are not interested, what are we doing reading those books? To learn how to read, the San Zi I Jing is enough. To learn how to behave, the Analects of Confucius is enough. When we lead soldiers to fight, Zhou Yi must be studied. Like me, these 3 books have to be memorized backwards, but my elder brother never asks me to memorize the other books. I just read them once. Ji Heiran said confidently. I dare not say anything else, but in the field of leading troops to fight, on the other hand, apart from General Yuan and my elder brother, I think no one can compare. Lu Dehe looked up at Ji Heiran, who had offended him without knowing it, and said after a moment of silence, I thought you looked down on me for being illiterate. It turned out that it was really a simple suggestion to him. Ji Heiran was slightly stunned, so he tilted his head to look at him, curled his lips and said, how can you still have a delicate heart? There are so many illiterate people in this world, do I have to look down on them all? Besides, you are not old now. Daddy, if you want to learn how to read, start to learn now. Do you really have a room full of books just for display? Lu Dehe said bitterly, I am 32 this year, and it is too late to start learning how to read. Ji Heiran said disdainfully, you are only 32, and you look like you are in your twilight years. Cao said in his 60th year that he is an old man with aspirations for thousands of miles. If you start studying now, no matter how poor your aptitude is, you will always be able to learn all the characters in 5 years. Finished, read the Analects of Confucius and read the characters. What books do you not read or learn? Lu Dehe was startled. Although he didn't understand Ji Heiran's old man standing on the ground, he knew Cao, and he also understood the 60th year and aiming for 1,000 miles. He lowered his head in thought, and finally got up and bowed to him. Thank you, General Qi, for waking up. Ji Heiran was secretly stunned. It seems that what Aling said is still very useful, and he can use it in similar situations in the future. Ji Heiran was secretly proud. He didn't remember how he was scolded by Mu Yangling back then. Back then, Qi Ziyuan didn't set Ji Heiran so low in the beginning. It was all because the boy stagnated on the way of studying no matter how hard he whipped him, and he would regress as soon as the whip stopped. Qi Ziyuan could only settle for the second best, and didn't ask for it. He memorized the 4 books and 5 classics, but at least he had to read them well, and he had to complete the homework assigned by his teacher. Qi Ziyuan had already asked his husband to lower the difficulty of assigning homework to Ji Heiran, but there was the temptation to train troops and line up before, and the temptation to call friends later. Ji Heiran was still miserable when faced with those homework. He could only change flipping through the textbook and shouting bitterly. When facing Mu Yangling, he couldn't say that he was stupid. He could only say that he was busy and delayed his homework, and then said that he was getting old, and he might not make any progress in the future. I can't even read much. This made Mu Yangling very contemptuous, because Ji Heiran was only 14 years old when he said that, so he used Cao as an example, telling others that Cao was already 60 years old and still had a long way to go, and he was only 14 and he was so good at reading. I can't do small things well. In fact, Mu Yangling wanted to mention another famous person in history. That person seemed to have passed the 30s before he started to read and write, and finally went to take the imperial examination to get ahead, but Mu Yangling didn't remember who that person was, let alone that person. Whether the person was before or after Song Dynasty, if it was before, this person still existed. If it was after, wouldn't she list a person who didn't exist? In order not to make this mistake, Mu Yangling can only use Cao as an example. Although it is not appropriate, but fortunately Ji Heiran listened to it, and although he will still complain later, he will not find various excuses not to study. And Mu Yangling didn't expect that after so many years, these words would be borrowed by Ji Heiran to encourage a bandit leader, let alone that the bandit leader would study hard because of this, and become a well-known Confucian general in the future. Chi Heiran kindly picked out the 3-character classic and the Analects of Confucius for Lu Dehei after encouraging him, and picked out several worth-reading travel notes and military art books for him. These are worth reading. Chi Heiran turned around the study room and saw that Lin Man hadn't arrived yet, so he said unhappy, "Lin Man's movements are too slow, or is your human ability too weak, and you haven't found anyone yet?" Lu Dehei, who was holding a book with great interest, had a dark expression on his face, and looked at Chi Heiran suspiciously. "How did General Chi know that I had someone notify Lin Man?" Chi Heiran curled his lips. "How can I notify you? This general signed a contract with the two of you. You didn't rush to ask me as soon as I entered the door. You were obviously waiting for Lin Man, but I have cooperated with you to delay so much. It's been a long time. Why hasn't he come?" Lu Dehei is helpless. "Since you are so smart, why don't you be smarter and pretend you don't know? There are so many books in the room, you can just pick out one and talk to me all day, right?" At this moment, Lu Dehei is not quite sure whether Chi Heiran is sometimes smart and sometimes stupid is intentional or just by nature. "Why don't you call a banquet first, and we'll wait for him while we eat," Chi Heiran said hesitantly, and he didn't want to say it clearly, but he was really hungry. Although he brought dry food these 2 days, how could they dare to let go of your belly? They all only ate 3 full, and the rest of the dry food was put away for emergencies, which meant that he hadn't had a full meal in a month, and it was lunchtime, and the aroma of the food outside kept wafting in. His stomach contracted one after another, even if Chi Heiran wanted to pretend he didn't smell it. Lu Dehei looked at Chi Heiran's stomach, nodded when he heard the words, opened the door and went out to ask someone to go to the kitchen to order a table of meals. Although Lu Dehei was anxious, he didn't ask Chi Heiran. The current situation was just to prevent Lin Man from suspecting him. After all, it was a matter of 3 people. It was a taboo for him to bring Chi Heiran and his people back privately. "I don't want to make Lin Man unhappy in this matter anymore." But he didn't expect that Lin Man would delay so much time, and he didn't come until now. Lu Dehei was unhappy in his heart, but he continued to discuss the issue of reading with Chi Heiran with a smile on his face. Now he also understood that Chi Heiran did not have the contempt that ordinary scholars have for their muddy legs, but instead had a deep hatred for reading. When the food was ready, Lin Man finally arrived smelling of fat and powder. Chi Heiran looked up and down Lin Man, who had dark eyes, smiled, and said understandingly, "Is the head of Lin married a wife?" Lin Man was taken aback for a moment, then curled his lips in disdain and said, "What kind of wife do you want to marry now? If you want a woman to hook hands in the courtyard, most of them will come to you." Chi Heiran frowned slightly, just nodded, and didn't say anything else. At that time, Lu Dehei said contemptuously, "You just talk loudly, and you don't know how hard it is in your heart. Who doesn't know that you don't want to marry a wife, but no woman from a good family is willing to marry you? If there is a woman from a good family to marry you now, I think you will lick it. How dare you go to the Gulen courtyard?" Lin Man said angrily, "It sounds like you can marry a wife from a good family. If you have the ability, try marrying one." Lu Dehei snorted coldly, and said, "I can't marry, but I'm telling the truth, unlike some people who dare not even admit the truth." Lin Man snorted and did not speak, then turned to ask Chi Heiran, "Why is General Chi free to visit us? Is there any new move by the court?" Speaking of serious matters, Lu Dehei also restrained his emotions and looked at Chi Heiran. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 506. Chi Heiran rubbed his nose and said, "The court doesn't have any new moves, you two don't worry." Lu Dehei looked at Lin Man, and Lin Man curled his lips in dissatisfaction and said, "This is nothing new for the imperial court. The 200,000 troops surrounded us and wished we could all be cut down. Who swore to say that at the beginning? Will you inform us? Half a month has passed. If you hadn't shown up on your own initiative, we might not even be able to catch your shadow. Chi Heiran smiled and said, although this general does not show up, holding something in your hands is like holding my lifeline. Unless I die, I dare not recognize it. The faces of the two of them looked better now. Only then did Lu Dehe ask the question he was most concerned about: why is General Qi in such a mess? The Imperial Army is only 3 or 4 days away from here. Since you can escape the bandits along the way, how can you take the initiative to run to the place? Huayuan County is here. What Lu Dehe was most afraid of was that Chi Heiran would lose power in the court. In that case, they would really have lost a whole card. Chi Heiran thought about it for a while before telling them about the massacre in Tukan, saying, this time, I came here to investigate those people, but Huayuan County is your sphere of influence, so I asked the two masters to accommodate you. Lin Man also hated the barbarians and Tartars, and was about to agree immediately when he heard the words, but was kicked under the table by Lu Dehe. Lin Man closed his opened mouth again, bowed his head and did not speak. Chi Heiran just pretended not to know, but looked at the two with full expectation. Lu Dehe asked, we are bandits, and you are officers and soldiers. Now Xixia soldiers are coming to trouble you. It should be a good thing for us. Why should we help you? Lin Man frowned, feeling that what Lu Dehe said was wrong, but he didn't know what was wrong, so he frowned and looked at Chi Heiran, who also frowned. Chi Heiran said displeasedly, no matter how we make trouble, this is our Dazhu's business. It is wrong for Xixia to get involved. Our Dazhu has already lost most of the country, so why not let Xixia swallow the remaining half? That's because your officers and soldiers are incompetent, Mr. Lu said. Don't forget, we are bandits. Don't you feel shameful when you tell us to defend the country? Chi Heiran choked, and looked at Lin Man. Does Master Lin think so too? Lin Man opened his mouth and murmured against Lu Dehe's pressure, everyone is responsible for the rise and fall of a country. Lu Dehe gritted his teeth, but what we are doing now is the subjugation of the country, and you are full to protect Dezhou now? Can you distinguish between priorities? Okay. Chi Heiran said solemnly, Master Lu, I think it's you who should distinguish between the main and the secondary. There is a big difference between the death of Dazhu by your hands and the death by Xixia. A new country was re-established on the border of the country. Although the people fell into war, there will always be a day of peace. How to live in the future, but if it died in Xixia or Jin, no matter whether it is a subject of the Great Zhou, or you are all subjugated people, and the people of the entire Great Zhou are second-class citizens. After the Great Zhou perished, but were controlled by the Tartars, can you really live a better life? All this is what you want to see arrived. Lu Dehe snorted coldly, your Great Zhou will perish in Xixia, but it doesn't mean we will too. A mocking smile appeared on Chi Heiran's face. Dazhu has a total of more than 800,000 troops, and only one monarch. If we all die in Xixia, do you think you bandits can defeat the Xixia army? Your alliance is really so fair, justice can convince people, so you two wouldn't come here to defend the city, would you? Lu Dehe stopped talking. Chi Heiran persisted and said, besides, the imperial court has no real intention to exterminate you. Now even Lin Man couldn't believe it anymore, a 200,000 army is surrounded outside. But how many people are really fighting with you? Chi Heiran interrupted the other party and sighed, trust me, the Holy Majesty does not really want to exterminate you, but just wants to give you a blow, and then I can talk to you about peace. If he really made up his mind to destroy you, then I will definitely admire him so much. Lu Dehe and Lin Man stared at him unkindly, and Chi Heiran regretted unconsciously, it's a pity that the Holy One doesn't have that courage. The treasury also doesn't have that ability. Of course, this crucial sentence was rejected by Chi Heiran. Stay in the bottom of my heart. Chi Heiran couldn't care less about eating, and he almost drank all his saliva. Anyway, he was trying to persuade Liu Dehe to put down his political views and cooperate temporarily for the sake of the nation. After Xixia's conspiracy was disintegrated, they should fight and make peace. He will do his best to help them. Regarding Qi Heiran's promise, not only Liu Dehe, but even the innocent Lin Man were skeptical. Qi Heiran immediately moved his elder brother Qi Ziyuan out, saying, "My elder brother is the second most powerful general in the Zhou army, even if the emperor gives up, no one will give up on me." Liu Dehe reminded coldly, "You were abandoned once before when you were surrounded. That's because of the siege. My elder brother hasn't received the news yet. I'm beyond my reach. Aren't I free now? If those generals dare not offend me, the emperor won't bet on my elder brother's temper." "Who said you are free now?" Liu Dehe asked rhetorically. "Qi Heiran." Lin Man came back to his senses in a jerk, looked at Qi Heiran for a moment, then pointed at him and laughed loudly, "You have thrown yourself into a trap, ha ha ha." With black lines all over Qi Heiran's head, he turned his head and asked Liu Dehe, "You want to imprison me?" Liu Dehe shook his head, "I just doubt whether you still have the value of cooperation. Qi Heiran wants too much, and what he can give them is still a big cake he drew, who knows if they can eat it. And now Huayuan County is not only he and Lin Man, but also a head of Yang, who is not a fuel-efficient lamp. Originally, he and Lin Man were transferred here to share 2/3 of his benefits, and there are others. If you move, I'm afraid it will push the opponent into a hurry. Qi Heiran's identity is a bomb to him, and it is also a glass of poisoned wine to them. It may happen at any time. If the alliance knows that he, Lin Man and Qi Heiran have cooperated in private, then the two of them will definitely be torn apart in the belly. The name of a traitor will definitely not be able to get rid of it by then. So Liu Dehe is not willing to take this risk, or in other words, the benefit Qi Heiran offered is not big enough for him to take this risk. Now, instead, he hopes that Qi Heiran will leave." Lin Man agreed with what Qi Heiran said, and privately persuaded Liu Dehe, "I think he is right. We fight with the imperial court. It is our de Zhou's business. Who knows what conspiracy is there when 11 Xia intervenes? I see, we just help him, isn't it, just to look for traces of their group? We haven't lost anything. What do you know? Qi Heiran is waiting for us to board the pirate ship. I'm afraid we will be tied to it and unable to get off," Liu Dehe said worriedly. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 507. After all, Liu Dehe didn't help Qi Heiran, but he didn't stop him either. In his words, if he is allowed to develop, whether he can find it all depends on his ability. Lin Man was worried for a while and then let go, and went to play on his own. Let others do this kind of worrying. Qi Heiran was arranged to enter Liu Dehe's camp, and led his group alone, and he was free to come and go in Huayuan County. The head of the camp was very surprised. "General, how did those bandit leaders agree?" Qi Heiran glared at him, and said, "Here we must call Lu Dangjia and Lin Dangjia, don't forget where you are standing now." "Yes." Mr. Yang Qian lowered his head slightly, but still asked curiously, "What conditions did the general agree to let us walk freely in Huayuan County?" "They are well aware of righteousness, knowing that we are looking for the Xixia Tartars, so they agreed," Qi Heiran said casually. Mr. Yang Qian didn't believe it, but Qi Heiran had already drawn several circles on the map and released the search mission. Qi Heiran decided that if they couldn't find it in Huayuan County, he asked Liu Dehe to randomly assign them an identity in other places. County town to find. Qi Heiran was looking all over the world for the Xixia soldiers who sneaked in. At this time, the Xixia soldiers had just finished fighting with an imperial army. After clearing the battlefield, they dragged out the corpses of a dozen bandits from behind a bush and scattered them on the ground. Evacuate quickly after setting up the scene. Where Qi Heiran can't see, the battle between the imperial army and the bandits is gradually heating up. Even the emperor and the imperial court are unaware of this, and the peace negotiation team prepared by the imperial court is ready, and they can set off just waiting for the news from the front line. At the same time, there were constant skirmishes at the boundary line between the kingdom of Jin and the Great Zhou, and the situation became more and more tense. General Yuan had dealt with the kingdom of Jin for more than 20 years, and he was vigilant. He was the first to discover the crisis. Call to discuss. Shen Mu pondered for a moment and said, "It's better to be on guard first, and report to the court after obtaining certain evidence." General Yuan took a deep breath and understood Shen Mu's meaning. Now the court's eyes are mainly focused on the Jinghu South Road, and I'm afraid they won't pay too much attention to it. The emperor has always been afraid of Jingguo. From past experience, they reported not only would he not be able to get support, but he might be warned not to clash with Jingguo's army. General Yuan turned around on the spot a few times, and said, "The report to the imperial court can be delayed, but Qi Ziyuan and the other generals need to inform them to make preparations early." Shen Mu nodded, and wrote a letter to Qi Ziyuan himself. Qi Ziyuan also noticed that the Jin Kingdom's army has been making frequent moves recently, but because they were all small-scale conflicts, he thought it was just a general raid on the grassland, so he only called people to pay attention to protect the lives and property of the people on the border, and did not take extra actions. After Shen Mu's letter, Qi Ziyuan immediately ordered people to strengthen their guard and adjust their defenses. The battle for imperial power in the kingdom of Jin has just ended, so they will start a war at this time. Rong Xian was very puzzled. "I'm afraid it's to divert domestic attention," Qi Ziyuan said in a deep voice. "That's not enough to gamble the whole country. If they lose, we may take back the Central Plains." Qi Ziyuan's face was serious. He didn't believe that the people in power in the kingdom of Jin were fools. Is it because of the incident on South Jinghu Road that they thought they could take advantage of it? Rong Xian said, however, only 200,000 troops were restrained on South Jingnan Road, and our troops in the north have not decreased at all. Besides, the emperor didn't want to fight those bandits at all. He just beat them up and recruited them. Those bandits, you're not a fool, you shouldn't fight to the death with the imperial army, right? Qi Ziyuan's heart skipped a beat, and a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. You said that only 200,000 troops were restrained along the Jinghu South Road, and none of our soldiers in the north were transferred. That's right. Rong Xian looked at him strangely. Didn't the emperor draw troops from the southwest and northwest? Rong Xian paused at this point, watched Qi Ziyuan's eyes gradually widen, and said in surprise, "You mean?" Qi Ziyuan's face was serious, and he sat on the chair with deep eyes. "Although it's just a guess, we must inform General Yuan and the generals guarding the northwest of this matter, so that they can strengthen their precautions." "Where is the emperor?" "You don't need to report it first. We don't have evidence, so it's useless to report it. Let people pay attention to the news on Jingnan South Road. Heiran is there, maybe he will find something. As soon as there is a letter, send it up immediately." Rong Xian nodded in response. When all parties were working towards their own goals, a team sent by Qi Heiran finally found the imperial army, and told the leading generals about the massacre of the village and Qi Heiran's speculation, hoping that they would send a team out respond to Qi Heiran and the others, and try their best to find the Xixia soldiers who sneaked into the Great Zhou. However, this matter did not attract the attention of the generals of the imperial court. He just met the commander of the battalion as a matter of business. In his opinion, it is completely nonsense that Xixia soldiers sneaked into Jinghu Lake. You must know that there is Guizhou in the southwest. As for Yunnan, it is completely impossible to pass through these two places and avoid the eyes and ears of the imperial court. He felt that this was completely Qi Heiran's way of inviting favor, so he only left Qi Heiran's people to the people below to arrange, and didn't care about Qi Heiran's whereabouts. Qi Heiran overestimated the generals of the imperial court army, and also overestimated the knowledge of the court ministers and the emperor. The booklet he sent to the emperor finally arrived in the hands of the emperor after untold hardships. The fact of the road, and clearly stated that Zixia Wolf's ambition is evident. But even if the emperor only read it, the ministers in the court didn't take it seriously. Everyone agreed that Chi Heiran was thinking too much. Recently, there have been many good news on Jinghu South Road, and the emperor really didn't have the heart to read such a book. Therefore, it was the evening of the second day after the excerpt was transcribed after several twists and turns and delivered to Qin Xiang and Yan Teifu. Qin Xiang read the excerpt back and forth twice, sighed and said, "I am in great danger." Qin Xiang's staff asked, "Then Xianzhai, do you want to persuade the emperor to pay more attention to the southwest and northwest?" Qin Xiang shook his head, "The emperor is very suspicious of me at this time, so let's put this matter aside for now. Even if Zixia is ambitious, my army of 800,000 is not just for show." Teifu Yan also took the note and said worriedly, "I'm afraid what Chi Heiran reported is true." Yan Du asked, "Then father, should we remind you a little bit?" Teifu Yan nodded, "If you find one or two more colleagues, you will attract the attention of the emperor." However, Teifu Yan didn't report much hope. The emperor was elated at this time, and he was afraid that he would not be able to listen to other voices. Yan Du is a King Liu and has never formed a party. At this time, his father asked Dora to pull a few officials to submit papers. He felt distressed for a while, and pulled out all the officials he had made friends with. In the end, he went to visit them one by one, but in the end he was willing to go with him. There were only 5 Jizi, and Yan Du felt that the number was pitifully small, so he thought of Chi Feng and Fan Saiwen. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 508. Yan Du thought for a while, and went to Fan Saiwen first, hoping that he could give him a free copy in the tomorrow morning, as a little support for his nephew. Fan Saiwen was trying to ease the relationship with his son. After hearing the words, he weighed the pros and cons, and felt that this matter was not too big, so he could do whatever he wanted, so he agreed. As for Chi Feng, he thought about it for a long time and agreed to send a copybook for his son. Yan Du ran for a long time, and finally counting Fan Saiwen and Chi Feng's friendly sponsorship, there were only 7 or 8 people who were willing to believe in Chi Heiran. This ratio is really not worth mentioning among hundreds of ministers, because it is Yan Du. The upward fold only caused a little ripple, but it was only a little ripple, which was quickly overshadowed by the good news from Jing South Road. On the contrary, Qin Xiang stood up and seconded Yan Du when Yan Du came out to draw the emperor's attention to the question raised by Chi Heiran. Not only Yan Du, but also the other ministers looked at Qin Xiang in surprise. Their eyes kept looking between him and Yan Du back and forth. Looking at the emperor with gloomy eyes and Yan Du who was equally suspicious on his face, Prime Minister Qin curled his lips in disdain. He just stood up because he saw too many stupid ministers who couldn't see it, and it was in his interest to be wary of 11 Xia. As a result, a fool is a fool, and a single sentence can scare them into this. Because there were too few ministers who seconded the proposal, and the emperor himself was very afraid of Prime Minister Qin, the matter was inexplicably put on hold, but Fan Zijian found out about it through Fan Saiwen, and only then did he realize that it had been a long time I haven't received Chi Heiran's letter yet. The same is true for Mu Yangling. Those ministers don't believe in Chi Heiran, but Qi and Fan Zijian do. Fan Zijian was planning to do something big in the Jiangnan shopping mall at this time. Chi Heiran was not in danger anyway, so he just asked a question and left it alone. Let Mu Yangling go again when Chi Heiran got into trouble again, or when his life was in danger. Look for him. Mu Yangling twitched the corner of his mouth. Chi Heiran was so unreliable in Fan Zijian's heart. Fan Zijian was not interested in fighting, but Mu Yangling asked someone to find a detailed map of Jinghu Lake, and studied it every day to see if he could guess Jihaeren's whereabouts from the map. Xixia soldiers sneaked into the Jinghu area from Yongyi, so Zhu Liang also sent a map of Yongyi to Mu Yangling. These are all military maps. Mu Yangling raised his eyebrows slightly when he saw it, and glanced at Zhu Liang, who was bowing his head, and knew that he probably had control of Jihaeren's power in Linen Mansion, otherwise he would not be able to get this kind of military map in hand. Mu Yangling didn't ask any further questions, and waved him away, which made Zhu Liang slightly relieved. He was really afraid that the fourth grandma would ask him where he got this thing, although he could not say it or push it away. Fourth master's head, but this will definitely displease fourth grandma, or create a rift between fourth master and fourth grandma. With fourth master doting on his wife, he must be the one who suffers in the end. But if he broke the taboo again by telling the truth, the fourth master might suspect him later, and his future would be over. It's really wonderful to be like the fourth grandma without asking a word. Mu Yangling spread the map on the couch in the room and took a look at it when he had time. Xiaobao can walk and run now. One of his favorite things to do now is to come to play with his younger brother, and open his eyes every day. He started to ask for his younger brother, wishing he could grow up in Zayahua courtyard. He rushed in and saw the fourth aunt standing in front of the couch looking at those pictures again, while the little brother was sleeping in a corner of the couch by himself, stretching his legs. Try to eat your own little feet. Little Treasure ignored the fourth aunt, ran over directly and tried to stand on tiptoe to see his younger brother. Seeing that he was trying to stuff his foot into his mouth, he clapped his hands twice, wanting him to let go. Open. Seeing this, Xiao Bao's wet nurse Wang Momo hurriedly pulled his hand, and said in a low voice, "Second young master, you can't hit third young master's hand, you must talk to third young master properly." Mu Yangling raised his head when he heard the words, and smiled at Xiaobao. "Xiaobao, are you here to play with your brother again?" Hearing this, Xiaobao grinned his white teeth, smiled and took his younger brother's hand, and shouted, "Bear, bear." 3 black lines slid down Mu Yangling's forehead. After thinking for a while, he said, "Xiaobao, this is my younger brother, not a bear. He hasn't taken a nickname yet. When your fourth uncle comes back, you can ask him what he calls his younger brother." Xiaobao was not happy anymore. He pulled his younger brother and shouted loudly, "Ah," and then shouted loudly, "Bear, bear." Li Jinghua, who was entering the door, let out a puchy laugh, and said, "Will you still talk nonsense in the future? You clearly know that the child's memory is the last, but you always teach the child in front of him, bear child, bear child. Now you know that you are wrong, right?" Mu Yangling was helpless. Who knew that Xiaobao would remember so much trouble? It's just a name that he can remember until now. Hurry up and give Saner a nickname, otherwise Xiaobao will always remember this name. Li Jinghua stepped forward and carried his son to the couch, letting him play with his younger brother. I also wanted to quickly give him a nickname, but Jihaeren specifically said that he would keep the name until he came back to pick it up. How long did it take for him to come back, and there is no letter? It's just a nickname. How much time will it take him? If he pays attention to Saner, he should be more serious when he chooses his name in the future. Li Jinghua persuaded said, "Don't talk about it in Dongfu, but come here once a day to ask Saner's name, saying that everyone can call it if you take it out. If you don't name the child again, I'm afraid the father-in-law will do it for you. Whose family do you see? Your child is almost full moon, but he doesn't even have a nickname." Mu Yangling frowned. "Why don't you call me Bear?" Li Jinghua glared at her. "This is too perfunctory. Do you really plan to be called a bear boy in the future?" Saner was born with a strong body and a loud voice. After 3 days of sleeping and eating and drinking, his energy was infinitely vigorous. Although 7 of the 12 hours a day were sleeping, except for 2 hours of eating and drinking. Lazar, the rest of the time is to toss Mu Yangling and the servants. He must let someone hold him in his arms and walk around, otherwise he will cry loudly. Even if there are many maids and women around him, Mu Yangling still lost a lot of weight in 7 or 8 days, and one day 3 children made trouble again. Mu Yangling was so angry and aggrieved that he snatched him away from his mother-in-law's arms at once, and while patting his butt lightly, he cursed, "Bear boy, what a bear boy, just like your father bear." At that time, Xiaobao was standing aside, looking at his younger brother with bright eyes. He heard the fourth ant talking about this non-stop, and he remembered it in his heart. In fact, Mu Yangling felt that Xiaobao wanted to imitate her as Xiangzi, but because he was too young, he couldn't pronounce the word children, so he could only call bear. At first, Mu Yangling just said it casually, but now he yelled little bear twice, but he felt that it was not bad. Who said this is the bear of a bear? The 3 of us took the bear of a black bear, which means health and well-being. Healthy and fit as a bear. While talking, Mu Yangling picked up the child, kissed his little cheek, and said with a smile, "When his father comes back, if he doesn't like it, just give him another one. Let's call him Little Bear first." Li Jinghua lowered her eyes and read twice, then sighed, "Mothers just want their children to be healthy. This nickname is really good." She took her son's little hand and said, "Xiaobao, my little brother has a name now, so I will call him Little Bear from now on, understand?" Xiaobao tiptoed to pull his brother's quilt, and shouted, "Bear, bear." Mu Yangling's face was immediately covered with black lines. Looking at the excited Xiaobao and his ignorant son, he began to wonder if the nickname she had chosen was not very good. Li Jinghua laughed loudly when she saw it, got up and said, "Please help me take Xiaobao, I'm going to be a guest at General Yuan's mansion, and I won't be back until the afternoon." Mu Yangling put his son on the couch, and said with a smile, "Sister-in-law, go, Xiaobao stay at home and let him take care of the third son." Mu Yangling hesitated for a moment, but continued to use his son's old name. "Why is there a banquet at General Yuan's mansion?" General Yuan's mansion has always kept a low profile, but it has held 2 banquets in a row during this time. Li Jinghua smiled and said, "There are 2 girls in the Yuan family who are about to marry Ji, and they are about to start dating, so they held 2 banquets in the name of the old lady, but only these few times. I heard that the Yuan family has already seen the 2 of them were hit, but they were just using the banquet to find out about each other's character." Mu Yangling nodded, and sent Li Jinghua out. When she turned around, she heard the screams of the servant girls. Mu Yangling rushed in, and saw her son throwing a water dragon into the sky. The water dragon drew an arc and landed precisely on the map scattered in the distance. The girls turned pale with fright, and rushed up to rescue the map, but Mu Yangling hurriedly stopped them. "Stop, don't move the map. Although this is a military map, the proportion is not large, so there are many places that are not on it." Mu Yangling compared Chi Heiran's previous notes and some travel notes in the past few days, and then added some things to the map. It's not done, and many things haven't been added yet, so she doesn't dare to be moved. She turned her head to look at her son who was kicking his legs comfortably on the couch after urinating, and said silently aha twice, and said, "Take the third young master and the second young master to the side room to play." Xiaobao was staring blankly at his younger brother with his mouth wide open, then turned his head to look at the fourth ant's tutu. Seeing that the fourth ant didn't notice him, he quickly closed his mouth, curled his neck and nestled in the arms of the girl's sister, not daring to move up. He coaxed his younger brother to pee just now, but he really didn't mean to. Mu Yangling didn't care about the 2 children at all, but took the cotton cloth to rescue her map. While saving her map, she was heartbroken. When she carefully used the cotton cloth to absorb the water stains in a corner of the southwest, her face looked pale. Suddenly he calmed down, and looked at the small corner with a slight gaze. She gently stroked one of the small dots with her hand, and said, "Has this dot always existed?" Seeing Mu Yangling's whole body was covered with cold air, Li Shun said with trepidation, It should be, none of us dare to touch Grandma's map. Mu Yangling couldn't help but pinch the barely visible point on the map with his fingernails. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 509. Mu Yang was a little flustered. Although Qi Heiran hadn't returned any letters for nearly a month, the entire South Jingnan Road was at war. There are also. Qi Heiran is not good at other things, but he is good at fighting. She never doubted his ability in this area, so she never worried about him. Linan is the capital city, and it should be said that there is no safer place than here, but looking at this small dot on the map, and thinking of Qi Heiran's excerpts, are Xixia soldiers really just sneaking into Dazhu to collect information or provoke officers and soldiers? With the bandits, let them melee and consume national power? Mu Yangling knew that her brain was a bit big, but she just couldn't help feeling flustered, feeling that Linan had become unsafe. But she knew that no one would believe this kind of intuitive thing. It would be great if Qi Heiran was here, even if he thought it was ridiculous, he would definitely believe her. Mu Yangling took a deep breath, put away the map, and spread out his pen and ink in a distraught state. Assuming a war broke out in Linan, how would she protect her family, especially her 2 children? After smearing all morning, Mu Yangling destroyed the manuscript by writing down some messy precautions and things to prepare on the paper. The nannies also came over with 2 children in their arms, and the nannies carried the 3rd child to Mu Yangling. 4th Grandma, the 3rd young master is a little hungry. Mu Yangling carried his son into the inner room to feed him. Looking at his anxious son, Mu Yangling scratched his face lightly, and said with a soft smile, "Good boy, you will be safe and sound, mother will protect you." Xiaobao was also drinking milk, and the 2 children were a little sleepy after eating and drinking. Mu Yangling put the 2 brothers to sleep together on the small bed, and asked the girls to watch carefully. Someone went to find Zhu Liang. Mu Yangling half leaned on the couch to take a nap in the morning, and it was past noon when Zhu Liang arrived. Mu Yangling said, "I have some things for you to prepare, you put aside the less important things at hand first, and, the 2 young masters also need to have a few more people around. You can find a few trustworthy women and girls who have some kung fu skills and put them next to them, and the safety of the village will be checked every 3 days." Zhu Liang was surprised. What happened? Such a big move. Mu Yangling didn't explain the reason. Firstly, she is the master, so she only needs to give an order. Secondly, if she said it, it would be more suspicious, so she didn't say it at all. Moreover, her sense of crisis is more derived from intuition, which cannot be used as evidence. That small point is just a small canyon, through which one can directly enter Dazhu from Xixia, and there are sparsely populated places 100 miles away. It is very easy to hide one's figure, but it is just a canyon, and the most important thing is that the terrain on both sides is a bit sinister, and that place has always existed, and there has never been a case of marching from there. But when Mu Yangling saw that small dot, his heart skipped a beat, his whole body's strength seemed to be drained all of a sudden, his body was a little floating, and his mouth was tongue dry. It took a while to recover. Mu Yangling had never had such an experience, but her subconscious told her that it was dangerous, very dangerous. Blessed to the heart, Mu Yangling thought of Qi Heiran's note. She knew that this kind of thing was illusory, not to mention other things. If she hadn't experienced it herself, she might not have believed it. Mu Yangling has always believed in her feelings, so she made these arrangements. She was a little worried that she would make so many adjustments without any explanation. He also nervously asked if there were any other orders. Mu Yangling thought for a while and said, "I don't have anything else for the time being. You can arrange it first. Don't tell Grandma about it beforehand. I'll tell her later. Let's also arrange 2 wives who know Kung Fu, it will be more convenient. Best wishes." Zhu Liang only made such an arrangement when Mu Yangling got some confidential information. As for not telling Grandma, he agreed without any pressure. Before coming here, the general mentioned that he mainly listens to the orders of the fourth master and the fourth grandma. He knows that the general trusts the fourth grandma very much, and he trusts the eldest grandma very much. So I don't think there is anything wrong. Li Jinghua is Qi Ziyuan's public endorsement in the capital, but in fact, she knows that Fan Zijin and Zhu Liang are jointly responsible for many of Qi Ziyuan's confidential matters, and judging from Fan Zijin's frequent discussions with Mu Yangling, it is obvious that Mu Yangling is also the one who participated in it was because she was so impressed by Mu Yangling's rush to rescue brother Qi Ziyuan back then that she was very calm about this matter and didn't mind her. Seeing that she often recruited Zhu Liang into the mansion these 2 days, she only thought that they had some confidential matters that were inconvenient to talk about, so she didn't ask too much, but within 2 days, Zhu Liang sent her 2 wives, even Xiaobao has 2 more mothers-in-law and 2 girls in their 20s. The 4 women were all in their 30s, they all combed their heads and wore dusty clothes, standing in the corner and could almost be ignored, while the 2 girls were older, especially besides Xiaobao, and they obviously don't even know how to do the most basic job of serving people. Li Jinghua couldn't help frowning. She turned to Wen Kui and said, "Let's arrange the 4 nuns and the 2 girls first, and I'll go talk to the 4th grandma." Wen Kui responded and invited the 6 people down. After arriving at Mu Yangling's place, Li Jinghua discovered that San'er also had 2 more women and 2 older girls. Li Jinghua sent people away, and then asked, "What happened? Why did you think of matching us with so many wives?" Mu Yangling looked tired, and said, "This is just in case, these people know how to fight, I wish the steward spent a lot of effort to find them, sister-in-law, let's use them first, with them accompanying the children, we will take it easy, too." Li Jinghua lowered her eyes, she was surrounded by her people, if 2 people were inserted rashly. Mu Yangling didn't know about Li Jinghua's concerns, so he just sighed and said, "There is no news about 4th master, and I don't know what's going on." Li Jinghua laughed when he heard the words, "You 2 are too sticky. Before the war, he also wrote to you every 3 days. This time, you are so anxious if you haven't lettered for more than 20 days. Your eldest brother still you may not write a letter to me in 2 months. After Li Jinghua finished speaking, she wanted to bite her tongue. This sentence was too ambiguous. Instead, it seemed that she was complaining that her husband was not close enough to her. Mu Yangling, who has always been sensitive, didn't notice it, and even stared at the teacup in his hand in a daze. Li Jinghua was slightly startled, but she was relieved of Mu Yangling's arrangement of people around her and the child. Maybe something really happened, otherwise why is Ling so lost? Li Jinghua opened her mouth, wanting to ask what happened, but she was always smart, so she opened her mouth and closed it. When she said goodbye, she only said that she would make arrangements for the person she sent. Mu Yangling nodded and said, "Sister-in-law must take the 2 wives with her when she goes out, and don't leave Xiaobao either." Li Jinghua agreed, but Wen Kui was a little annoyed. When there was no one else, she complained to Li Jinghua in a low voice, "4th grandma interferes too much, it's a taboo to intervene, how can she be so open to grandma and young master, put people around? Even if it is the mother-in-law of a direct relative, you should ask whether the person concerned agrees before placing someone in. Mu Yangling is just Li Jinghua's sister-in-law or sister-in-law, and her status is lower than her." "Shut up," Li Jinghua scolded her in a low voice, "where does she think there are so many? Don't ask me to hear such words again." Wen Kui lowered her head a little aggrieved, "Grandma, although 4th grandma is a bit naive about the back house, it is indeed a taboo thing, and there are always 2 people who are not her by her side." "Do you think those 2 wives belong to the 4th grandma?" Li Jinghua asked lightly. Wen Kui paused, her eyes widened, and Li Jinghua sighed, "Don't worry, she doesn't have such thoughts now, having those people around does more good than harm. But if the 4th grandma changes her mind in the future? At that time, if I still can't subdue people, Then my skills are not as good as others, Li Jinghua said indifferently. In Linen City, only we two sisters-in-law can depend on each other and protect the children. If we still have conflicts, that's just going to court death, so don't let me hear these words again. Wen Kui bowed her head in response. Li Jinghua sighed, saying that it is impossible to have no complaints in her heart, let alone before. Qi Ziyuan didn't trust her. She could understand, after all, she couldn't fully trust her husband, and she had no children at that time. But now that she has given birth to a child, it means that she has the opportunity to fully integrate into the Qi family. Qi Ziyuan did give her a lot of rights because of this, and told her many secret things that she didn't know before, but with Mu Yangling compared with what she knows and involves too little. Before Mu Yangling gave birth to her third son, she had won the trust of Qi Ziyuan's brother. She would tell her many things and even discuss with her, because she knew that she and Qi Heiran were childhood sweethearts, and her father was her husband's subordinate. As far as confidential matters involving their brothers, she was not jealous and complained. But it has been a year since she gave birth to her eldest son, and she is still not as good as the sister-in-law in Qi Ziyuan's mind. It is impossible to say that there is no resentment in her heart, but she always warns herself that it is still early, so wait for a long time. Trust will naturally increase. Fortunately, Mu Yangling's sister-in-law is shrewd in foreign affairs, but a little scheming in internal affairs, which makes them get along well. Li Jinghua's thoughts changed, and she let out a breath of depression. She finally figured it out. She met the 4 women and 2 maids who had been sent in person. As for subduing them, this kind of thing cannot be done overnight, so naturally it has to be done slowly. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 510. Mu Yangling shook the little bear in his arms, and said with a smile, "Good boy, is this fat again?" The little bear vomited a bubble at his mother, and then stretched out his hand to grab her hair. Mu Yang shook his head slightly and teased him with a smile, "I can't catch it." Standing on the ground, Xiaobao saw his aunt talking and laughing with his younger brother, so he hugged Mu Yangling's leg and climbed up vigorously, wanting to see his younger brother. Mu Yangling sat down on the couch, and brought Xiaobao up to let him see. Seeing Bibake Xiang's younger brother, Xiaobao was satisfied, and grabbed his little hand to talk to him. At first, he could say the words brother or bear, but after playing with the toy, Xiaobao couldn't speak clearly, and started talking to the little bear in the language of his own country. Teased him by flicking the toy in his hand. Little Xiang obviously liked this brother very much, staring at him with wide eyes, reaching out his hand from time to time to grab something in his hand. Mu Yangling was sitting by the side and looked at them with a smile. He was about to ask someone to surround the 2 children and let them play by themselves when he heard some noises in his ears. Mu Yangling raised his head and looked outside. Li Chun took a look outside and saw the girl outside was sitting on the porch doing needlework, so she asked curiously, "What's wrong with 4th grandma?" As soon as the words fell, Li Chun's face changed slightly, and she had already heard the noise, and the noise was getting louder and louder, obviously aimed at them. Li Chun was in doubt, who dared to make such a loud noise in the backyard. Mu Yangling waved his hand and said, "Go out and have a look." Turning around, he called the 2 children's nanny and the maid, and said, "Look at the young masters, stay close." Then let the mother-in-law and girl who were protecting the 2 children also come over to guard the children. Then Mu Yangling got up and stood at the door. After a while, the noise reached the gate of the courtyard. The whole Zayahua courtyard was alarmed. Girls and women all ran out to stop Mu Yangling. Their expressions were a little timid. They and Zayahua courtyard were both prosperous and damaged. No matter who broke in this time, they have no other choice but to try their best to protect their master. Mu Yangling didn't stop the servants from standing in front of her. She was looking outside curiously. She really wanted to know who it was that made trouble for her. As soon as the commander of the guards who pushed open the gate looked up, he met Mu Yangling who was standing at the gate. The commander of the guards looked at Mu Yangling with a heavy expression for a while, then lowered his eyes and stepped forward regardless of the servant's obstruction. Mu Yangling raised his eyebrows. Is this someone from the palace? The commander of the guards clenched his fists and saluted. I have seen Qi Gong, and I am the commander of the left guard of the palace, and I am here on business by order. I don't know what your lord is going to do, but you want to come to the backyard. The guard commander pretended not to understand Mu Yangling's sarcasm, and said, Your Majesty was ordered to invite MRSG and Qi Gong into the palace to accompany the Queen. The Queen has been feeling unwell recently, and I really want to talk to some wives. MRS Gong still has a young son to take care of, so MRS Jia and MRS Gong brought the two young masters into the palace, and I specially ordered them to come and escort them. Li Chun behind Mu Yangling gasped. Are they going to be escorted into the palace as hostages? Mu Yangling's heart was also tense, but he said without changing his face, since we came here according to the order, we will naturally obey it, but my sister-in-law went out this morning, please allow me to arrange someone to invite her back, and it will be inconvenient for the children to enter the palace, and there are many things to pack, do you mind waiting a little longer? The commander of the guards looked at the guard who was holding the sword hilt and had been staring at him. He really wanted to bring him back to the palace to complete the task, but he also knew that his attitude should not be too tough, and Qi Li was indeed not in the mansion. He nodded slightly and clasped his fists. I can be tolerant for a while, but the palace is pressing hard, and I ask Qi Gong to move faster. Mu Yangling nodded with a smile, turned around and summoned a little girl casually, and said, Go find a coachman, hurry up and call the grandma back, and tell me that there is something urgent at home. He beckoned to Wang Ma again, and ordered on the spot, quickly ask someone to collect the things of the two young masters, and don't leave behind the usual ones. Wang Ma is afraid that she will live in the palace for a while. Wang Ma agreed. Then Mu Yangling turned his head and told the guards at home, Sirs, please go to the front yard and sit down. We will send someone to notify you after we pack up our things here. The commander of the guards smiled and said, Don't dare to bother Qi Gongren, we just sit in the gatehouse in the yard, and if you need help, you can just order. He didn't dare to let Mu Yangling and the others out of his sight. Although he knew that the possibility of them escaping was very small, only being careful could save the 10,000 years ship. Mu Yangling didn't force her, and asked the guards to take the guards to drink tea in the gatehouse, then turned around and went into the room to make arrangements. Go and tell Wen Si to pack up grandma's clothes and some necessary things immediately. Guyu, you take care of me here. Mu Yangling paused for a moment, and said, Go ask the commander of the guards, we have two maids here, but we need to bring more people around the two young masters, there must be a lot of nurses and waiters, ask them, at most you can bring a few. Li Chun hurriedly went out, came in after a while and said, Fourth grandma, I asked you and the eldest grandma can only bring one each, but the two young masters can bring more people, no more than 6 each. Mu Yangling immediately said, Then everyone will bring 6 of them with them. She will arrange the 2 wives and 2 maids of Kung Fu, and the remaining 2 places will be wet nurses and a personal maid. In this way, the comfort and safety of the child can be guaranteed. Mu Yangling left Wang Ma and Guyu behind, and said, I will leave the matter in the yard to you. After Grandma and I leave, you should close the gate of the yard tightly, don't go out easily, and don't conflict with Wu Shi and the others. Try to bear it, if you can't bear it, find a chance to scare the chickens and monkeys, and frighten them. In short, our yard must not be messed up during our absence. Wang Ma and Guyu responded. Wang Ma lowered her voice and asked, Fourth Grandma, do you want to find a way to inform Zhuangzi? No, I have my own arrangements over there. The little girl who went to inform Li Jinghua just now didn't just go out to inform Li Jinghua, this kind of situation was also within her emergency situation. Once it happened, the little girl selected by her a dedicated driver will be found to take her there. And the coachman is the one who conveys the news. Now, I am afraid that Zhu Liang's people have already got the news from the coachman. I only hope that he can stabilize the situation and don't mess it up. As long as Zhuangzi is safe, she and Li Jinghua will have the opportunity the capital that escaped with the child. Have someone pack up 2 sets of lighter clothes and take them with you, whispered to Li Chun, you should also pack up like this at grandma's place, go quickly. Li Chun responded with a slightly pale face. After Mu Yangling and the others left, he took out his most commonly used dagger and tied it to his leg, put down his skirt to hide it, and then got up to go out. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 511. Li Jinghua was escorted back with a pale face. Seeing that the things had been packed, she lowered her voice and asked, what happened? Mu Yangling shook his head slightly, I can't find anything. The guards who came here had obviously been ordered beforehand, and they didn't disclose any information to them. The guard commander stepped forward and said, Madam Qi Gong, it's getting late, let's set off. Mu Yangling and Li Jinghua looked at each other, nodded slightly, turned around and walked out with their little son in their arms. The members of the Qi family had long avoided, not only the Wu family and others disappeared, but also the other servants also avoided. Li Jinghua felt slightly chilled, after all, it was a family, and they didn't even see each other for such a big matter. Li Jinghua looked at Mu Yangling and saw that her face was calm. She didn't know whether to praise her for her generosity or her coldness. Mu Yangling has never treated the Wu family as a family member. It is human instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages, so she doesn't think there is anything wrong with what Wu and the others are doing. After all, she still hasn't integrated into the ancient thinking of big families. A group of people got into the carriage and were escorted by a team of guards to the palace. This time, their carriage directly entered the palace without walking. The carriage didn't stop until the second gate, and there were already 2 soft sedans parked there, obviously waiting for them. Mu Yangling raised her eyebrows slightly. She didn't expect that the treatment for entering the palace was so high this time. She nodded slightly to Li Jinghua, and each of them sat up with their children in their arms. The girls and women they brought followed closely on both sides of the sedan chair. Instead of leaving, he escorted them to Cunning Palace with the eunuch who carried the sedan chair. Eunuch Wei, the eunuch in charge of Cunning Palace, was guarding the door. When he saw the soft sedan chair falling, he hurriedly raised his smiling face and said with a shrill smile, Madam Qi and Qi Gong are here. Old Madam Yuan and Madam Yuan happen to also in the hall, the miscellaneous family will wait for the 2 of you to enter. Li Jinghua smiled slightly, nodded and said, thank you, Eunuch Wei. Li Jinghua handed Xiaobao to the nanny behind him, and walked in front, while Mu Yangling carried the child by herself and followed silently with her head lowered slightly. The Cunning Palace was very lively, not only the old lady Yuan and Mrs Yuan were there, but also Mrs Yuan's 2 daughters-in-law and 2 grandsons were brought into the palace. Mrs Yuan and Li Jinghua had a good relationship. When they saw them coming in, they nodded and smiled. Li Jinghua didn't dare to respond, so she took 2 quick steps forward and bowed down. After hearing the queen's cry, she stood up and looked towards the Yuan family, and said with a smile, it's a coincidence that the prince and his wife also entered the palace. Mrs Yuan looked at the pale and sickly empress, and said with a smile, I heard that the empress is not feeling well, and the old matriarch is worried, so she brought some of us juniors into the palace to have a look. The queen forced a smile, and said with sadness in her eyes, I'm afraid my health is not good, but I will be so tired that you go to the palace to serve the sick. This is what ministers and wives should do. Li Jinghua and Madame Yuan responded quickly. A female official came in from the outside, bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Wanking Hall has been tidied up, MRSG and Qi Gong can move in." The Queen waved her hand and said, "In that case, you can take MRSG and Qi Gong." She turned her head and sighed to Li Jinghua, "I'm not in good spirits, so I won't keep you here today. Let me tell you, my body just asked the imperial doctor to take care of it, there is no need to call you into the palace to attend to the sick." Li Jinghua hastily stated that being able to serve the sick in the palace was a blessing they had cultivated in 10 lifetimes, and after exchanging a few words with the Queen, the respectful old Madame Yuan and Madame Yuan left. Seeing that Li Jinghua and the others had gone down, MRS Yuan also got up to leave. This time the Queen didn't keep anyone else, and asked the female officer to take the Yuan family to the palace where they lived. From the beginning to the end, MRS Yuan did not say a word, and the Queen did not blame her. When there was only one female official left in the palace, the Queen let out a sigh of relief and fell back on the back of the chair. Hung Mei hurriedly supported the Queen and fed her water. The Queen took a sip of hot water and felt that she was recovering, so she waved slightly, "It's okay, help me go back and rest." Hung Mei said a little dissatisfied, "Old Madame Yuan is too sure about her identity, she is just a minister's wife, but she keeps showing embarrassment to the Empress." The Queen said in a moody way, "She's not showing me face, she's showing face to the Emperor, don't care about them, just let them make trouble, I don't have a son, what does all this have to do with me?" Hung Mei couldn't help lowering her head, "Your Majesty, you still have the eldest princess. She even has children, why do I need to worry about it?" The Queen saw many people today, she was really exhausted, so she lay down on the bed after returning to the inner room. The Wanking Palace is not far from the Cunning Palace, so it should be regarded as its subsidiary palace. Although it is subsidiary, it is actually not small. There are 5 big rooms in the middle, not counting the wing rooms on the left and right sides. This should be the place where the concubines live, but the Emperor's concubines are not many, so they are attached to the side of Cunning Palace, so the houses here have never been lived in. The people they brought hurriedly chose a room to go in, and the female officer brought a dozen or so court ladies and eunuchs, and then they would serve Mu Yangling and the others, while the people they brought only did some personal work. Li Jinghua inquired about the Yuan family's affairs with the female officer, "Does old Madame Yuan also stay in the palace to serve the Empress?" The female officer smiled and said, "Yes, the Yuan family lives in Chiyuanzai not far from the Wanking Hall. If MRSG is bored, you can go to visit. If you want to go to the Imperial Garden, just tell the maid or the servant, and they will come to you arranged." It didn't sound like a servant, but it sounded like someone who came to live in the palace for a while. Not only Li Jinghua, but even Mu Yangling couldn't recognize it and was surprised. The lady officer didn't seem to notice, and thoughtfully mentioned several interesting places, telling them to just talk about what they lack. As for the Queen, they need someone from the ward to call them. When the people left, Li Jinghua breathed a sigh of relief, and said to Mu Yangling, "I'm afraid something serious happened. The Emperor called the Yuan family and the Qi family who control the military power into the palace. I don't know if it's from the pass, an accident, or a change at the border." Mu Yangling lowered her eyes, and she had some guesses in her heart, but she was not sure. She said, "Since the female officer said that you can go out for a walk, sister-in-law might as well go to Yuan's house, MRS Yuan is old and prestigious, it was only natural to greet you in the past." Li Jinghua nodded slightly, "But it's not good to be too hasty, pack up your things first, and I'll go and have a look later." Li Jinghua looked at his son who was running around the room curiously, and then at the little bear who could only spit bubbles by himself, opened his mouth, but couldn't make a request. Mu Yangling had been looking at her, and understood immediately when she saw this. She stepped forward and held her hand and said, "Don't worry, sister-in-law, as long as I'm still here, No one will be able to move Xiaobao, and Xiaobao will definitely be here if the bear is here exist. Li Jinghua's eyes were slightly wet, and she grabbed Mu Yangling's hand tightly and choked up, saying, "My good sister, sister-in-law of great kindness and virtue will not say much. From now on, sister-in-law will pay you back with this life." Mu Yangling said optimistically, "Sister-in-law, don't live and die, maybe nothing will happen, don't scare yourself." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 512. Mu Yangling put the two children on the couch and asked them to play together. Li Shun carefully avoided the outside eyes and ears, and said in a low voice, "Fourth grandma, do you want to find a way to send the news to the outside?" Mu Yangling glanced at her indifferently, and said, "Don't make up your own mind, we just need to live in the palace with peace of mind. At this time, it is better to be still than to move. Is it because I don't know the news and pass the news rashly? Is it because I don't die fast enough?" In the afternoon, Li Jinghua went alone to the palace where the Yuan family lived to visit the old lady Yuan. Only then did she know that not only the two of them were taken into the palace to serve the sick, but also the family members of the other three generals. The military power of an army of more than 10,000. Among them, General Yuan and Qi Ziyuan were taken care of because they held heavy troops and were far away from the south of the Yangtze River. The two of them were arranged in the affiliated palace of Cunning Palace, but the other three were also arranged to live in the harem, all of which were used to serve the queen. Excuse. However, not only female family members came into the palace, but also young children and old ladies. Obviously, these two types of people were the main hostages. You can remarry if you lose your wife, but men always value blood. Unless they are really cold-blooded careerists, they will rarely give up their children, let alone their mothers. If they can even give up their mother, wife, and children, the emperor will have to praise them for being cruel, but such people must be very few who are willing to follow, and the opponent has lost from the very beginning. Of course, the emperor's act of taking the family members of his courtiers as hostages will also be criticized, but he has capital willfulness. As a courtier, do you have it? Detaining the hostages in the palace made the emperor feel a lot more at ease. He sent an order to take good care of the officials and family members who entered the palace to serve the sick. If they have any requests, as long as they can be done, they will all agree. As long as they don't spread the news or leave the palace, that's fine. General Yuan is very filial, and the old lady Yuan is in the palace. As long as she is well, General Yuan will not dare to do anything. As for Qi Ziyuan, although he has no mother, he has his first son at such an age, so he thinks he will take it very seriously. The emperor expressed his regret for the discord between Qi Feng and Qi Ziyuan, otherwise he would have been more confident in detaining Qi Feng. And Qi Feng, who was outside the palace, was both indignant and happy at the same time. Outraged that his status with his son was so low, he was not even qualified to be a hostage. Fortunately, he didn't have to be a hostage. The outside was in chaos because of the sudden war, and because of the emperor's actions, the waves were surging. The palace was completely isolated from the outside, but after 2 days passed, they still learned some things one after another. For example, the battle between the imperial army and the bandits became more and more fierce, and both sides suffered heavy losses. Just before the emperor sent out the recruiting officials to reach Jingnan South Road, a group of bandits shot and killed the leading marshal. Without a leader, the army was in chaos. The bandits seized the opportunity to attack the city. At the same time, the southwest and northwest borders were in a hurry, and the Xixia army pressed the border. When the emperor received the 800-mile rush, the other party had already captured 5 counties. The emperor just felt worried, and an urgent report came from the north. The national army is pressing down on the border, and even wants to invade the border on a large scale. General Yuan and Qi Ziyuan have negotiated to jointly boycott the Jin soldiers. This dissuaded the emperor, who originally planned to send Qi Ziyuan back, and the flames of war raged everywhere, and the flames of war seemed to ignite throughout the entire Zhou dynasty overnight, and the emperor's eyebrows turned white with worry. How complacent he was before, how regretful he is now. He thought that by killing Qin Xiang's subordinates and blaming the bandits, he could use this to remove Qin Xiang's power, and he could also take the opportunity to send a large army to suppress those bandits who are always inexhaustible, so as to completely control Jingnan South Road, but he didn't. Expecting that the mantis stalks the cicada and the oriole is behind him, now he is the mantis who will be hunted and killed by the oriole. Now he can't see through whether 11 Xia and Jingguo were involved in the things he did back then. He only knows that he is currently in internal and external troubles, and he must not be negligent, otherwise he will fall into the abyss. The emperor's hair turned half white overnight, and it was the first time he regretted his original impulse when he saw the war-torn country. But no matter how regretful he is, he has to persevere. In short, De Zhou can't be subjugated by him, otherwise, he will really become a sinner through the ages. At this time, what the emperor was most afraid of was that his generals would turn against him, so he had no choice but to invite the family members of these generals into the palace. The emperor didn't mean to hide the news from his family members. He asked people to release the outside news to these officials one after another. He just wanted to win their support. He hoped that they could write letters to the generals who led the army abroad so that they could take it out with peace of mind. Soldiers, serve the country. The emperor wanted to give some news a day, and then cry about his difficulties, and finally let them write a letter, but the situation is not optimistic. He receives news of lost cities and defeats every day, not only at the border, but also domestic rebellions have already begun. Spreading from Jingnan South Road, if we don't stop it, the whole Jiangnan will be involved in the rebellion. The emperor has no choice but to disclose all the news to those family members within 2 days, hoping that they can think about the country and encourage his son or her husband guards the country for him. The emperor felt that the reason why the city was lost so quickly, apart from their loss of opportunity, was that the generals were unwilling to do their best. Otherwise, how could the 800,000 army be so vulnerable? But now, his gold medal and imperial decree are of little use, and he can only place his hopes on the letters from his family members, hoping that they can take care of their loved ones and serve the country. The emperor conveyed this meaning through the queen, and everyone turned to the Yuan family. Of the 5 generals, up to now, General Yuan has commanded over 260,000 troops, Qi Ziyuan has commanded 150,000 troops, and the other 3 generals are only worth 100,000. In addition, the Yuan family's prestige is extremely strong, and almost everyone acts according to the wishes of the Yuan family. The queen also looked towards the Yuan family, and said with a smile, "How long has it been since the old matriarch wrote to General Yuan? It would be good to take this opportunity to say hello." Old Madame Yuan lowered her eyes and said calmly, "Thank you, Queen, for your concern, but my wife is illiterate and has never written to him. If the emperor sends a letter to my son, just send me a few words." The queen looked at Madame Yuan with a smile, and said with a smile that was not a smile, "The emperor sent an imperial decree. I'm afraid it will be inconvenient to pass on the message to the old lady, but when Madame Yuan writes a letter to the general, she can send it for the old lady." At that time, the imperial court rushed to send someone to send it, and General Yuan should receive it in a short time. The queen was worried that Madame Yuan refused to let her come down again, so she smiled and said, "Okay, you go back and write letters first, and I will send someone to pick them up later." Everyone glanced at Mrs Yuan, and all lowered their eyes. Everyone stood outside the palace gate, looking at the indifferent old Madame Yuan and Mrs Yuan, wanting to step forward to inquire, but under the watchful eyes of the maids and servants, they did not dare to go forward. Li Jinghua only took one look at the Yuan family, and pulled Mu Yangling away.